सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। The anatomical order, so wonderful. And in every order, we see something that is constant. And what is that constant thing in every order? There is knowledge. The intelligence that is so complete, so total, that all this that is manifest is nothing but knowledge. All that is manifest is in the form of knowledge alone. Because when you see the python, you see knowledge. Then we have another order, a psychological order, again a vast order, and that is how one is able to predict so many things about the human mind and how the human beings behave under different situations. And there are also so many branches: social psychology, clinical psychology, psychiatry, all these things. So many branches. When you see the connection between the past, the grip of the past on the person's behavior is there. That is the order. Anger, psychological order. Whenever a desire is inhibited, then one gets angry. If I don't get what I want, if I cannot have what I want, anger comes. This is the law. This is the psychological law. It's so beautiful. That there are ways to manage the anger, given. That there is anger, given. That certain circumstances for manifesting or producing that anger, given. That there is an unconscious, given. That the unconscious is actually a protective mechanism on part of the child, whose brain is not completed, growing. And so this unconscious, what does it do? It's a gift of Bhagavan. There also you see Bhagavan. Bhagavan makes the child forget. So that there is total, freedom from pain when it is growing up. So when it is growing up, it grows free from pain. And then later on it has to address that pain. That is also given. Because so many things it sees, it cannot come to any conclusion other than, maybe I made a mistake, because it internalizes everything. Or it cannot handle the fact that the mother may be wrong or the father is inconsistent. They are not available when the child wants. These are all huge things. And so the child comes to wrong conclusions. But those conclusions are suspended until later, until the child grows up and is ready to tackle them and address them. Nobody can have an impeccable, background. Everybody has a background vitiated with abandonment. And that the universal issue is feeling abandoned and unloved, given. It's a part of the psychological order. All mental disorders, disorders is the, is the whole field of psychiatry. Disorder is a manifestation of the order. Disorder is included in the order. That is why we don't have any such confusion that God is all good and the bad belongs to devil. We neither have evil or evil with a D in front of it, devil. We don't have anything. That which manifests as the order, which includes the disorder. So basically it's an order that transcends everything. It includes the disorder. This is the understanding of Ishvara. It includes the disorder. And when you say it includes the disorder, it includes if you are talking of the psychological order, all the personality disorders. From the small garden variety personality disorders, OCD, etc., to schizophrenia, everything is included within the order. That there is dissociation included, because is included within the order. Why is there dissociation? Because this is a coping mechanism for trauma and pain. It is included in the psychological order. And we don't say that the psychological order is a mandate of Bhagavan, it's the very manifestation of Bhagavan. Oh, so when I am angry, there is Bhagavan? Definitely. Without Bhagavan, you cannot get angry. But then why I don't like anger? That is also Bhagavan. But then why do I want to get rid of the anger? That is also Bhagavan. That it is given to not like the disturbed eye, because the eye happens to be tranquil. That is also Bhagavan. Disturbance also is not outside of Bhagavan. Nothing is outside of Bhagavan, just like nothing is outside of space. If you say how to get out of space, even though there is a term called outer space, still space. From where we stand, it's the outer edges of space. That's what we think. But can we build a ship that takes us out of space? What a question. What is outside of space? Nothing. Only one's thinking sometimes, that's why we say spaced out. Yeah. So that's the only thing that could be outside of space. That which accommodates everything is the definition of space. Similarly, nothing is outside of Bhagavan. The space between two things, Bhagavan. Space itself, Bhagavan. Time, Bhagavan. Everything is Bhagavan. And that which is manifest as everything without being any one thing, that is what we call Bhagavan. So we saw the psychological order, we saw the anatomical order, we saw the physiological order. Then there is an order that is often missed. What is that order? Yeah, the dharmic order. That I want people to be good to me. Who taught me that? That everybody should keep saying thank you, sorry, and be very polite. Who is the one who is teaching me that? Even a little child knows. that I don't want my possessions to be taken away from me, that I don't want to be defrauded, I don't want to be cheated, I don't want to be lied to, I don't want to be taken advantage of. I don't want people to disrespect my rights and my privileges. This is dharma. And not just one person feeling this way. You go anywhere and ask anyone, they will all say, do you want to be cheated? What are they going to say? Yes? Because we are a strange society and we belong to this particular tribe, and yes, we want to be cheated? No. In fact, so much so that even the person who is habitually given to cheating does not want to be cheated. That's why there's always a falling out among thieves. First they will band together and they will say, okay, let's rob this bank, and then they rob the bank, and then, there should be only one getaway car, but the mastermind has got another getaway car and somehow siphons most of the funds there. And then when they find out, what are the rest of the people going to do to the mastermind? Yeah. They are going to just, make him have his last meal, that's all. Yeah, they are going to come after him. And even if he escapes them, let's say they don't kill him, he escapes them, whole life he has to be so worried that they'll come and get me, he can't even go shopping with that money. This is also the order. This is also the order. The order of dharma is that even the most hardened person given to crime doesn't want anyone else to cheat them. This is what it is. And that's why we have, there is a segment sometimes which is called dumb criminals, and then you see the stories there and you cannot but laugh. And what did this dumb fellow do? He and his friend wanted to sell some marijuana on the street. And then, they went to sell. And then one of them was little, was very sly. And then he had other plans than just selling the drug on the street. So he said, I'll just hold this, just a minute, we have to make proper packets and everything. Give me all that, let me just hold this. And he took the whole thing and ran away. Outran the other person. And the other person, this came in the news, was so distraught that he called 911 to report. First of all, that drug they had stolen from some other drug lord. And then in between them they had a falling out, and one of them made away with the whole mall. Mall means the booty, all the things, the loot. And then the first one was so distraught that they called 911 to report stolen marijuana. And of course he was the one to be caught. So this itself shows that dharma, one cannot escape dharma. Because it is something that everyone wants. If not directly one wants to be dharmic, one wants other people to be dharmic towards them. Yeah, like Duryodhana was complaining, people are not polite to me. This is the thing. Now people are not being nice to me. Duryodhana is complaining to Lord Krishna. They are not very nice to me. Are you being nice? That is why dharma cannot be enforced except by you. That's why we have that golden rule is possible. Do unto others as you want them to do unto you. Do not do unto others as you don't want them to do to you. It is there. Why? Because it is sensed. It is the first thing that everyone wants. And you cannot really enforce it. I mean, you do enforce it. That's why you have such a big, complicated penal code in every country. If you do this, this will happen. If you do that, you will go to jail. If you do that, this many years inside. And if you do that, that many years parole. If you do this, no parole. If you do this, death row. All these things are there. But still dharma is the best way to enforce it is to be dharmic towards others. This is also given. And dharma again is not the mandate of Bhagavan. First mandate, thou shalt not lie. Second mandate, thou shalt not steal. Third mandate, thou shalt not, hurt other people. This is not a mandate. This is the manifestation. Wherever there is dharma, there is Bhagavan. And if you are leading a dharmic life, you are very close to Bhagavan. No conflict. Easy. Then can you complain, I don't see Bhagavan? No, Bhagavan is with you all the time. That is the voice of conscience. That is Bhagavan. That which guides you what to do, that is Bhagavan. That which tells you this is not a good idea, that is Bhagavan. Your capacity to follow it, that buddhi, is also Bhagavan. That you are able to follow it and lead a wonderful life, Bhagavan. This is all Bhagavan only. And then what happens if you don't follow dharma? Huh? Another order starts to take shape. What is that order? Karmic order. That the flouting of dharma has consequences, that is part of another order called the order of karma. Again, an infallible order. Manifesting constantly. Again, even if I am not in the... Sometimes people are not in touch with dharma. Why? Because balaha means they are still young emotionally. They don't know what is correct, what is not, or even if they know, the force of the raga dveshas are so much, they are not able to do this. So therefore what? Even if they are not in touch with dharma, they will definitely be in touch with karma. Why? It's biting all the time. It's biting all the time. So dharma means you have to have pratipaksha bhava. Pratipaksha bhava means you should be able to see, put yourself in the other person's shoes and say, look, I know how that will feel if I had this done to me. Therefore, I will not do this. It's not fair. It's like as simple as going to the supermarket or some, shopping place, and then it's all filled because it's a big city and somebody is waiting because there is somebody coming out of the parking lot. And what does this person do? Zooms outside and then goes and puts it there. Puts their own car there. Correct? It could be something as simple as that. But it has consequences. Why? Because whenever you go against an order, there are consequences. Those consequences are called the karmic order. The order is not hurt if you go against it. Like if you put your finger in the fire, does the fire get upset because the fire is affected? No. Then if you ask the fire, why did you burn my finger? Fire will say, I didn't. Fire will shrug its shoulders in the form of two flames. And it will say, I didn't burn you. You were the one who violated the law here. What is the law? My nature is to burn. Did you not burn me in my finger? Yes, I did. But you burned me. No, I did not. You did the foolishness of putting yourself in a place where burning takes place. That is what it is. This is the law of karma. If you rub against the order, it rubs back. It obliges you by rubbing back. Nothing happens to the order. And so therefore, how to live a life without rubbing becomes the main concern of the human being. That is also part of, coming back to dharma. That is also part of the order. And wherever there is dharma, there is Ishvara. Wherever there is good karma, there is Ishvara. Why not bad karma? Because bad karma is not outside of Ishvara. But if you are reproducing it, Ishvara is not going to get the results of karma. You are. Correct? Yeah. This is what Valmiki learnt. Valmiki thought he is doing his family a favor. What did he think? He thought, I am doing my family a favor because I am stealing and looting and killing people in order to make a living. And one day he trapped Narada, thinking Narada was a rich man. And he said, stand and deliver. And Narada said, Narayana, Narayana. That's all he said. He said, shut up. Don't give me all this Narayana thing. What's in your bag? He said, 2 chapatis for breakfast. That's all I have. How come you don't have money? He got angry. He says, you know what, my son, I think you're doing something so wrong. No, I'm doing this for my family. Are you sure? Go ask I'll stand right here. Go ask your family if they are going to take the karmic consequences for what you have done. Of course, they'll say yes. Okay, go ask. And to be sure, he took his upper cloth and tied Narada to the tree to make sure he would be there. Went home in the middle of the night. The family was surprised because he only comes home during the day. He has a night shift job, graveyard shift, a gravely adharmic job. And so the family was like, are you okay? What happened? And he says, he says to the wife, will you take my karma? Because I'm doing all this for you. The wife says, it is my karma to be married to you. So I'm not going to do this. I'm already getting, I'm already getting my share of this. I'm not going to take this. Then he wakes up the elderly parents who are living with him, and he says, oh, parents will never say no. And the parents said, we educated you, we did this, we don't know why we have such a bad karma to have a son like you. Don't put us into this. In fact, we are leaving tomorrow, they said that. Then he woke up the children, and the children said, what is karma? We don't know, we don't want your karma. We don't want it, it doesn't sound good. Then he went back, he had gone with such aplomb, and he came back a very sober person, and he said, oh, this is really it. I have killed so many people. I have looted so many people. I don't know what I do. How do I gain this, absolve myself? How do I atone for this? How will these karmas go away? And, Valmiki is given one mantra. Just repeat the name Rama. Taraka mantra it is called. That which crosses over the worst of, omissions and commissions. And so he really sits there, he takes it seriously. And he says, Rama, 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 Rama. And Narada goes away, does all his things of going to Vaikuntha, Kailasa, extraterrestrial travel. After a few years, many years, he comes back. And this man has meditated so much that the anthill has grown over him. That is why he gains the name Valmiki, which means Valmika means anthill. And Narada is surprised that out of the anthill the sound softly is coming, Rama, 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 Rama. So he cleans him up, and then he says, okay, this is enough meditation. From henceforth you will be known as Valmiki, and you can write the story of Lord Rama now. You write the story of Lord Rama. And that is how he authored the Lord Rama story. So that there is the karmic order given, and that the karmic order I am capable of violating, given. Once I have violated with more karma, I can atone for it, given. It's just so beautiful. That through knowledge, all this karma which is set up as a model goes away. That also is given. This is Bhagavan. All the orders, everything, wherever there is intelligence, there is Bhagavan. And if it is, the intelligence can be in a worm, in an animal, in a plant. The plants are also very intelligent. There is that touch me not. You go near it and all the leaves fold as though they are overcome with shyness. They just fold. And then you go away and slowly they will open. Then you go again, everything folds up. It's the way of survival and protection. Then there are other carnivorous plants. Fly trap, Venus fly trap. It's just standing there. It's got like a umbrella here, like a small umbrella. And then a deep blossom, which never really, it looks like a blossom. You can't even pick it, it's so tough. At the bottom of it, a deep blossom. Inside there is just a little liquid. And the sides are very slippery. And the unknowing bug comes in and falls there and is happily digested by the plant. Even though it says fly trap, anything can go. All these bugs and worms and everything go, and that liquid is actually its digestive system. When that bug touches the liquid, it is assimilated. So plants that are non-vegetarian, this is the intelligence of the plant. And there is another plant, they have recently, it was in the news, it's called the sheep eating plant. Ayyappa. Okay, fly eating plant, okay, we can somehow accept. The sheep eating plant is another completely different thing. It's got a tall, like a pole, a long shoot will come. At the top of it, some very nice fragrant flower will come. And that flower is so fragrant, and it's very nice flower. Purple colored flowers will come. And it attracts sheep and goats. Okay, what do? Because they think that they can climb the plant and enjoy the flower. But what they don't know until too late is that it has spikes all around. Not like spikes, no, they are like big, these railroad nails. You have seen those? Yeah. Huge, thick and sharp. And the sheep get entangled in that and just die, and the dead body of the sheep feeds the plant. It lives off of that. Doesn't need water at all, really. This is called the sheep eating plant. So you have non-vegetarian plant, you have plant eating animals, vegetarian animals, and it's this whole order is just fantastic. It is just a vast, unending and infallible order, appreciating which I appreciate Ishvara. That I am in the state of the karmic order, that there is helplessness, that there is fear, that there is samsara, that there is sorrow, that there is alienation, that there is discontentment, that there is separating from this order, not knowing who I am, is also given in this order. It is called ajnanam, atma ajnanam. And then, but see, the beauty is, even atma ajnanam, when I say I don't know who I am, I don't know myself. When I say I don't know, what am I saying? I know. I know. I am saying I know. I know that I have ignorance. So you see, the ignorance itself becomes, look at the magic, there is nothing ignorant. Even ignorance is an object of my awareness, this knowledge. So all that is here, that is manifest in the Jagat, is all knowledge. It's so beautiful. It's just unendingly beautiful. All knowledge. And this all knowledge is nothing but Bhagavan. And that I feel helpless, that I seek this Bhagavan, even though it is me, that I seek, that is also in order. That having sought this, then I can remove this ignorance with the help of the Upanishadic knowledge given. That is also a possibility. And that the Upanishad works, it's given. How do you know that the Upanishad dispels ignorance? How do you know that? Huh? How does one know that?
It's Darwin's survival of the fittest that's still with us.
Yeah, not fittest, it's the fit. That's all it is. No fittest. It is there. You are here, I am here, therefore it is there. Correct? Yeah. The only thing that is fit for the ignorance is Upanishad, which has survived. And why has it survived? Because that is given. That there is ignorance, given. That it can be removed, given. Free will, given. The abuse of free will in the form of adharmic activities, given. Where is Bhagavan not? Tell me. Where is Bhagavan not? This is what we call Ishvara. And from the point of view of form and function, we can invoke Ishvara. This is what gives us the power and the privilege to invoke Ishvara through many forms, many names, many avataras. Because everything is knowledge. And that knowledge invested with a particular name and form. I am the one who loads a particular name and the form. I am the one who says this is Shiva, this is Vishnu, this is Dakshinamurti, this is Mataji, this is, all these things I am the one who is saying. And I have the freedom to invoke Bhagavan in a stone, in a rare gem, in a piece of wood, in a book, because so many times that's why you say holy book. You don't step on it, you don't do this. That's why it's a book itself is Bhagavan. And we do that. Every altar you can keep the Bhagavad Gita and look upon that as Bhagavan. Granth Sahib, that is Bhagavan. This is what it is. So therefore, there is nothing in this universe that is unholy or profane. All that is manifest is only sacred. So that Bhagavan I invoke with a particular name and form. Why? So that as the Jiva who feels helpless and mauled by these various orders, mauled by the order of dharma, mauled by the order of karma, and so many orders, I come under the spell of the seasons, I come under the spell of my own mind, I come under the spell of other things in the Jagat. So I need to develop a relationship with that source of all knowledge, with that source of all, manifestation, the one who is the manifester. So I need to develop this relationship for two reasons. One, if I am suffering as a result of these laws, where should I go to seek some redress? You have to go to the source, correct? Even in a simple example, if the neighbor is making too much noise, you have to first go to the neighbor, knock on the door and say, it's after 10 o'clock, I'm trying to sleep, can you please turn the music down? Simple request. You have to go to the source of the noise in this example. Similarly, for any kind of redress for the one who identifies as a hapless, helpless jiva, that hapless, helpless jiva has to look upon the source as the object of devotion and approach that as a devotee for redress. That is the relationship that has to be forged as an interim step to knowing Bhagavan as oneself. It's a step that cannot be bypassed. Bypassing this step is the greatest misstep, really. So this interim, don't think because it is interim, I can go this way, I can bypass it. No, you cannot. Even though the mind wants to go directly to Brahman and forget all about this Ishvara business, no, you are missing a crucial step, because we happen to be populating a manifest universe. And so without invoking the manifester, my knowledge is incomplete. My understanding is incomplete. My preparation for this knowledge is also incomplete without surrender and supplication. So even to tap that grace that allows me to seek a teacher and study in an unbroken fashion without all these obstacles from within and without coming in, I need a place to invoke that. Even to tap that grace, I need a form, I need a name, so that all the obstacles don't come and disturb my pursuit. And that's why we say Shantihi, Shantihi, Shantihi. How many times? 3 times. Once is not enough. And why is once not enough? Because the sources of obstacles are too many. Adi Daivika Shantihi, Adi Bhautika Shantihi, Adhyatmika Shantihi. So 3 sources of obstacles. Obstacles over which I have no control. Things happen and I'm separated from the study without my knowledge, without my volition. Then obstacles from my immediate surroundings. I wish to come to class, but I don't like the other people who come, so I'm going to stay at home. People have told this to me. One time I received a call, is the other person coming? I said, I don't know, how will I know who is coming? No, because if other person is coming, I am not coming. We've had a falling out. It's a fallout, I tell you. It's an ultimate fallout. Adi Bhautika Ashantihi. Then finally all that is okay. The classroom is okay, people are okay, everything is okay. What is not okay? I am not okay. My mind is not okay. I sit in class, I hear the words, but I can't stop feeling sad. Eyes go off somewhere. and the sadness comes. If sadness doesn't come, sleep comes. Sometimes first sadness comes, then to overcome the sadness, I go to sleep. Then sleep comes. Sometimes both come at the same time. And sometimes what happens? All these blocks come. I'm listening, but I'm, objecting to everything that the teacher is saying. And the next verse of the Upanishad mantra I don't like. Why it is there? Why we have to talk about Bhagavan? Up till now everything was going so well. Why this Bhagavan had to come in the middle? Why can't I just know I am Brahman? Obstacles. Yeah. So many obstacles. That is why there is prayer, that possibility of supplication, the possibility of atonement, the possibility of redress is all there because the karmic order is there. You see that? The karmic order gives these obstacles, and the possibility of redress is there again because the old karmas were crafted by who? By myself alone as the jiva, and the new karmas are crafted by the same old jiva, right? And the old karmas, the new karmas act as an antacid to neutralize the acidity of the old karmas. Yeah. They coat the old karmas with that nice pink Pepto, what is it called?
Pepto-Bismol.
Pepto what?
Pepto-Bismol.
Pepto-Bismol color, yes. Yeah. So the old karmas are neutralized by the new karmas. Because the karma produces results, karma phala, again it's part of the order. Listen to this, it is so beautiful. That the karma produces result is part of the order. As you sow, so shall you reap. And the results are of two kinds, part of the order. What are the two kinds of results?
Punya, Papa.
Papa, punya. What is papa? Don't translate that as sin. It is not sin. Papa is the uncomfortable situations created by actions that go against dharma. Result of adharmic actions is equal to uncomfortable situations created in the here or the hereafter that have to be endured. And what is punya? Comfortable situations as a result of going along with dharma, to be again enjoyed in the here or the hereafter. When it is going to fructify, we do not know. And then there is still the larger, both papa and punya come under a larger rubric of twofold kinds of results. Drishtam and adrishtam. Immediate, visible result and deferred or invisible result. Adrishtam. Every action has that. And what is drishtaphala of following a dharmic life? There is immediate freedom from conflict, freedom from fear. You have a peaceful life. And adrishtam, you can enjoy punya later. And what are the drishtaphala of going against, dharma? You can get caught, like the robber who reported the stolen drug. You can immediately get caught, drishtaphala. But that catching is just part of the karmic order because there is adrishta still waiting. Yeah. And so the new karma in the form of surrender, in the form of prayer, removes the adrishta from the past, because this also creates adrishta. Do you see this? The new karma is adrishta. The adrishta cancels out the other adrishta. How beautiful that is. This is without the law and the order, we could not have had this. This is infallible. And so therefore, understanding this, how can one not invoke Bhagavan in one's life? How can one still say, I don't want to, I only came for Vedanta, I don't want all this God business. Yeah. It's not a God that is thrust down the throat. The God of Vedanta is not something that is a matter for belief. The God of Vedanta is you. And if you say, I don't want to study about God, that means you're not interested in self-knowledge. There is no God other than you. And that's why the highest form of devotion is self-knowledge. Pursuit of the self is itself devotion. Which other religion is going to come and tell you this? Which other, tradition is going to come and tell you this? This is something we have to understand. This Bhagavan is not the God of some wrath or some kind of a, fearful God who's going to, unpredictable and fearful. Locally we have to be afraid of, God Father, and in heaven also we have to be afraid of another kind of God, the Father. You remove the definite article and then you have God Father here and God Father there. No. That is not the God of Vedanta. The God of Vedanta is you. And that you have to understand as not only this embodied being, this awareness which happens to have a body, mind, sense complex and has a lot of complexes because of that. But you have to understand that same awareness in a different, most magnificent body, whose body is the Jagat, whose eyes are the celestial, shining bodies, the moon, the sun, the stars. This is the Bhagavan. This is what is you alone. That same awareness has a magnificent persona. And then if you are identified only as you, as the owner of this body, mind, sense complex, you come under the spell of that persona. And then when you see the grandeur of this persona is non-separate from you, then there is only one persona. All that is here is one. There is no two things. There is no you plus the limitless. How can there be two things? You delimit the limitless. The so-called limitless then becomes limited. Then it delimits you. There cannot be two entities. And for this removal, you have to understand what this persona is. Even to see it as you have to make a connection with it. You have to understand it, because the person who is in the process of understanding is not seeing this. So therefore, the bhakti, the shraddha in Bhagavan has to be paramount, because this is not a matter of belief. This is a matter of pursuit. It's a clean cognitive pursuit. And until I see, I have to understand. And any other kind of God allergies, we have people, especially in the West, who have God allergy. God means they run in the different direction. That's why I don't use the word God, I use Ishvara. As soon as you say God, the hives come out and they start scratching all over, very difficult. That allergy is nothing but, if I look at it, if I'm able to see that this God allergy is nothing but a manifestation of the psychological order of the fear of authority within me, then that allergy goes away. I have to be able to see that. I have to have enough grace to be able to see that my fear and my discomfort with having a relationship with Bhagavan is nothing but my own authority issues. Same thing with teacher, same thing with Shastra. I don't want anybody to tell me anything. Then why were you born, Yeah. Nobody should tell me anything. It's like the 2-year-old who mother says sit, the child runs. Eat, I am not going to eat. I'm not hungry. Sleep, I'm not tired. At 92 also the person is behaving the same way. From 2 to 92, what growth has taken place? Yeah. No change. Small baby, no hair. 92-year-old man, likely no hair. Small baby, no teeth. 92-year-old man also, no teeth. Maybe artificial teeth, but we are not counting, that. This is what it is. There is no growth at all. Angam galitam. Palitam mundam. Munda means head here. Yeah. Palitam mundam means the hairs have gone. Hairs have departed from the head. Angam galitam. The bones are dissolving. Meaning, all back pain, osteoporosis, everything has set in. Palitam mundam. Dashana vihinam jatam tundam. Mouth, the whole jaw has become toothless. Vriddho yati grihitva dandam. The old fellow goes holding a stick, because you can't walk otherwise if the whole body is melting, the bones are all melting, the hair is pelting, the skin is melting, and so what is this person going to do? Need a prop. So vriddho yati grihitva dandam. The old person is going, holding on slowly to the stick. Tadapi na munchati asha pindam. Still the whole big mass of desires has not melted. That has not reduced. Everything has reduced. Perception has reduced. Who are you? What? That one can see an elephant, one has to be grateful at that age. And recognize it as such. And then you cannot even, hear anything. Yaru? Who? Oh, I'm Dattu. Sattu? No, not Sattu, Dattu. Are you okay? Did you graduate? I'm 72. The person, mind doesn't work. Mind doesn't work. Hearing doesn't work. Hearing is having a meltdown. Eyes are having a meltdown. Hair has melted down. Brain cells have just, coagulated together in one big mass. Hardly any thinking is going. And then body is melting down. The bones are all becoming powdery, brittle. And the teeth have gone, Still the only thing that has not had a meltdown is this huge pinda. Pinda means this big mass of desires which the person has. Desire to accomplish this, desire to accomplish that. I still want this, I still want that. I want to live for, I want to beat that Chinese lady who is the oldest living woman now. And I want to live up to 125. I want to do this, I want to do that. I want to go bungee cord jumping. I want to do all these things. That asha pindam tadapina munchati. Even after everything has melted down, the person is not even able to think clearly, see clearly, hear clearly. This whole desires is not going to go. Bhaja Govindam says this. And so what should I do? I better inquire into the nature of the desirer. That's the only way to resolve the desires. Desires cannot be resolved. That is part of the order. It's like the hairs on the head. In fact, it's worse than the hairs on the head. Hairs will thin out and fall away. Desires will not fall. Will make you fall. That's what is the desire. You fulfill one, 3 more come in their place. And so therefore what? Therefore you have to look into the nature of the desire. And to look into the nature of the desire, you have to go to the source of that ignorance, which is knowledge, which is Bhagavan. You have to ask for that knowledge. And you have to develop a relationship with this Bhagavan. And the Upanishad understands this very beautifully. And then therefore says, let us look at the verse here. Therefore says, meditate upon this. Meditate upon Prabhum. Prabhu means what? Prakarshena bhavati iti Prabhuhu. Who is Prabhu? Pra plus bhu. Pra is a prefix, complete, and also the one who is unborn. Prabhu. The one who has had its being without taking birth. Prabhu, sometimes also called Vibhuhu. Vibhu means Visheshena Bhavati. That which is all pervasive without undergoing any change, that which has come forth. Vibhuhu. So Prabhum Dhyatva. Dhyatva, forget. Dhyatva means meditating upon. That we'll see later. We'll see what should be the object of the meditation. The object of the meditation is not just watching the breath and all these things. Dhyatva means to have a form to visualize. And what is the object here? Prabhum. That which is all pervasive, the one who is not created. Parameshwaram. Ishvara, who is Parama. The ultimate. Ishvara, that is the ultimate. The absolute. the one who is in charge of all the laws, the one who does not come under the spell of the laws. Tam. Tam what? Who is this Parameshwara? Uma Sahayam. Uma means knowledge. The one that is non-separate from the knowledge, just like one is non-separate from one's consort. So the consort of Bhagavan is all Shakti, all knowledge, a co-creator of the universe. And what is the Bhagavan's contribution is the intelligence, the raw material, and the knowledge that, and the all knowledge that transforms the raw material comes from who? From Maya. All knowledge. But again, only for Ishvara she is all knowledge. For the Jiva, it comes under the spell of all ignorance. That same Maya manifests in the Jiva as all ignorance, becomes for Ishvara all knowledge. Uma Sahayam. So seated alongside with Uma, I think of Lord Shiva. I visualize before meditation. And what kind of Shiva? Parameshwaram, the one beyond whom there is nothing. The truth of this universe, the truth, the author of all the laws, the author of all knowledge, all power, Sarvagnyam, Sarvavyapinam, everyone, everything. I visualize. Trilochanam. Trilochanam means having three eyes. And here also we can take two meanings. What is the first meaning? Past, present and future. Because the eyes see, that which sees the past, sees the present, sees the future. Trilochanam, meaning from whom nothing is hidden. Who is the Lord of time? From whom nothing is hidden at all. The past is obvious to whom, the present as it is unfolding is obvious to whom, and the future is also obvious to whom. Another meaning for visualization purposes, Surya Chandragni Lochanam. So all the luminous things in the universe are the eyes of this Bhagavan. If Bhagavan is the whole Jagat, what are his eyes? The eyes are the sun and the moon and the fire. All luminous bodies are the eyes because the eyes see. Sun, moon and fire are the eyes. Neelakantham. Neelakantham, I told you the story yesterday on Thursday I told you the story, but that story is from the Puranas. The Puranas succeeded the Upanishads. So you cannot say the one who drank the poison, you cannot say that here because that story came later. Neelakantham means, if the eyes are the sun and the moon, the sky is the throat for whom. And then we can also add Digambaram, whose Veshti, whose Dhoti is the entire directions are the clothes for whom. This is given elsewhere, not here. So like this you can keep on going with the metaphor, because if the whole Jagat is the form, what are the galaxies? The galaxies is just the various ornaments of Bhagavan. That is how we have to look at it. And Neelakantham, Trilochanam, Neelakantham, Prashantam. Prashanta here means the one Prakarshena Shantam, the one that is free of divisions. Yeah. The one that is free of divisions. Shanta also means resolved and quiet, all that is there. But from the perspective of Ishvara, that also you can say the one who is free of any kind of agitation, but also free of division, because the agitation is the division. No divisions. So why will the agitation happen? Only because there is a division between myself and the other, then only there is agitation. But we are invoking that which is totally free of agitation. Prashantam. Then what? Trilochanam, Neelakantham, Prashantam. Yeah, so these are the things. So these 6 words describe Bhagavan as Sagunam Brahma. As Bhagavan that has, Brahman, which is endowed with attributes. Now, when did Brahman start to have attributes? Not really, as though attributes. Yeah. Brahman is still Brahman, but from the standpoint of the creator of the universe, it has certain attributes there. And what kind of attributes are they? I already told you, incidental, as though, not intrinsic. So if you take away these 6 words, Neelakantham, Uma Sahayam, Parameshwaram, sitting, having blue body, having eyes, having legs, all these things, if you take away, will anything be taken away from Bhagavan? No. That much you have to understand. This is a form that I have invoked. And the as though, whenever you use the word as though, it means it is incidental. And why is this Bhagavan? Why are these attributes incidental? Because Jagat is incidental. Yeah. So in relation to the Jagat, you say Bhagavan is Sarvagnya, all-knowing, because there is something to know. And there are many things that one cannot know. So you say the non-knowing one invokes the all-knowing one, because there is the manifest universe. So then in relation to the manifest universe, from the standpoint of the manifest universe, you say all pervasive, because there is all, so many areas I don't know in the Jagat, so many galaxies, so many black holes. That which pervades everything is Bhagavan. So from the standpoint of the Jagat, again we say all pervasive, all knowing. The one who is in charge of the Parameshwaram, the overlord of all, the one who doesn't have an overlord. Again from the point of view of the Jagat. Only from the point of view of the manifest universe, where there is an as though duality, a perceived duality, these epithets which invoke Bhagavan are appropriate. Correct? So they do not constitute the essential nature, they are the incidental nature. As long as there is a manifest universe, as long as there is a jiva, as long as there are laws that are manifest, the maker of the law can also be invoked in the same manner. As the one who is the Niyanta, Antaryami, Antah, Tishtan, Yamayati, the one who sits within the body, mind, sense complex and one who sits in the Jagat or in the body, mind, sense complex and rules it. You can say both. Antaryami. And this is what we call God. So beautiful. This is Ishvara. And this is what it is. And so when you say Sagunam Brahma, this is the guna. The gunas are superimposed from the point of view of a manifest universe. When there is multiple, you have to say you are the only one and you are beyond you there is nothing else. When there is multiplicity, you say you are the one who has created all. So you know everything. Because we have to account for this quote unquote everything, we have to come up with all these words. This is the Lord of the manifest universe. Then the universe goes into a state of demanifestation. Then what happens to Ishvara? Don't say there is no Ishvara. Yeah. Ishvara remains, but without needing or having to lord anything, because the duplicity and the multiplicity has resolved. Ishvaratvam is not there. The overlord is there, but there is nothing to overlord. The overlordship is not there. And likewise, the jiva who thinks of itself as separate is not there. Everything is just a mass. And how do I understand it? Like in deep sleep, you have laya, correct? In deep sleep, we have something called laya. Laya means the cessation of duality. In sleep, is there any duality? Pray tell. No. You don't even know you are there. You know you are there barely when you wake up. So in sleep, just like there is no duality, there is no duality in the waking state, either. Really, that is the truth. But now, to conclude this discussion, in sleep, just like there is no duality, in pralaya means Ishvara's laya, when Ishvara recalls the universe, not because it's faulty. The cars and car parts are recalled because they are faulty. Karma is not recalled because it is faulty. It has done its job. The orders collapse, into whom? And that is Ishvara. And the orders are there as a potential still waiting to come again in the next kalpa, in the next cycle of creation. So the Ishvaratvam, the overlordship, there is a cessation of overlordship because the word overlord is used, side by side with that which is lorded over. And when the lorded over resolves, the overlord portfolio resolves. The overlord doesn't resolve. The portfolio of the Jiva and Ishvara resolve. This is called Pralaya. Then again with the new cycle of creation. Then there is something to overlord, there is something to manage, there is somebody to pray to from the point of the Jiva. Everything comes up again. Like in the dream state. In your dream, there is duality as it were, but then that duality resolves in the deep sleep. After dreaming, you go back to sleep, everything resolves. And so too here also it's the same exact thing. And so the manifest universe, the incidental manifestation, we have epithets such as, the overlord of all, the father and the mother of the universe, my own father and mother, the Jiva's father and mother, you who is the all knowledge, you who is everything, you who is everything to me, you who is the maker of all the laws, you please protect me, save me, help me. The one who is helpless is invoking you. This is the prayer. This prayer is very important. That is why it is given side by side with the Swarupa Lakshana as well, which we will come to next time we have the class. But this prayer is very important because it shows that this incidental manifestation cannot be missed. You cannot call it incidental. But again, like the example given for Tatastha Lakshana, how to recognize your friend's house if it is in a subdivision where all the houses look alike, like it is made out of the same cookie cutter mold, and everything looks, blue. Everything has a balcony in front, and you know that your friend has moved there. Then you say, oh, did you see this family? They came with a moving truck. And then you knock on any random door. And what will they say? Look at that house there, that one, which one? They all look alike, which one? Okay, do you see the one with the crow sitting on it? That's your friend's house. That may be your friend's house because we saw the moving truck stop there. Then you go to the house with a crow and it indeed is that of your friend. And then you have a very good time. And then you help the friend unpack. And the friend says, next weekend you must come because we are having a housewarming ceremony. Then when you go next weekend to their house, do you look for the crow again? No. The crow has done the job, correct? It has defined that. So similarly, Sarvagyatvam, all these qualities, it's like the whole being invested with all these qualities. That is what is called Tatastha Lakshana. Brahman, as though with all these attributes, is Tatastha Lakshana, is Ishvara, is called Ishvara from the standpoint of the manifest universe, invested with the overlordship. And then Brahman also has some essential, its own nature, because this nature is like the crow, comes and goes. But the other nature is intrinsic to Brahman. It cannot be separated from Brahman. What that is, we will see on Friday. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadagya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shantihi. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. 4 o'clock Bhagavad Gita class. 4 o'clock Western time. Any questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
So first we talked about meditation, and then this particular thing is not for meditation, it is for contemplation.
Which one? No, this is for meditation. Contemplation we haven't come yet.
But in meditation we have a mantra,
Yes.
but we don't visualize anything.
Yeah, you can.
You can.
Yeah.
So this
You
is
can
a-
visualize before the mantra, you visualize just like this. Yeah, you can.
You can. that's the
That's why, to bring the mind together, you can visualize, you can say, okay, Swagurum Pranamya, having done Namaskar to my Guru, I also do Namaskar to Bhagavan in this form. You can visualize, yeah. You can visualize before going into meditation. That's what it is being doing. Dhyatva, you see, Dhyatva, having visualized Munihi Gacchati, that we have not seen yet. So this is meditation. Contemplation will come later. Everything is Bhagavan, therefore bad thoughts are also Bhagavan. So can we conclude when someone kills another, therefore Bhagavan kills the person? No. I'll tell you why. Because that person has a free will, Nafise. And so when someone kills someone, they are abusing the free will, that is called adharma. Going against an order is adharma. But then from the standpoint of the one killed, that was part of their karma to die at the hands of someone. You see, that was also there. So it's not that Bhagavan is killing, but the person who dies, so that also Bhagavan is not killing that person. Because it was their own karma. Perhaps they had killed someone in some other life and they are getting their own deserts in this life. And here the person has unleashed the free will in the worst possible way and abused their free will, and therefore they are engaging in the act of killing, so to speak. So that is not done by Bhagavan. But ultimately when we say who is in charge of karma and what is it that brought the killer and the killed together, you have to say it's nothing other than Bhagavan. But you cannot say Bhagavan is killing and bad thoughts Bhagavan is making me have, because that means you are giving up volition where you have free will. Yeah, non-violence and forgiveness. Many say that Hindus tend to be weak on this side, meaning they err on the side of non-violence and forgiveness and tend to suffer. Prithviraj Chauhan defeated Muhammad Ghori so many times, but then let him off and forgave him. But after so many battles, Muhammad Ghori defeated Prithviraj. Had Prithviraj not forgiven and let Ghori go, history would have been different. On the other hand, you see a Mughal king who would have immediately killed the enemy once captured. Today, Pakistan's missiles, the thing is that two different things, by the same token, if you are talking about non-violence as a collective issue, then, Prithviraj Chauhan might have been defeated by a Mughal king, but really speaking, India won its independence by that same non-violence and forgiveness in the form of Gandhiji. And why India? The whole civil rights movement borrowed from, overtly. Martin Luther King Jr. made no, compunction of the fact that Gandhi was his inspiration. Gandhiji was his inspiration. So not just one movement, not just one successful social movement, but we have a series of successful social movements where non-violence as a value has been used to gain Indian independence from the Britishers. The Civil Rights Act and the civil rights were gained. The injustices heaped upon a whole population were gained using the collective value of non-violence. And the apartheid was dismantled in South Africa also by non-violence. Yeah. So then, how can we say that non-violence is weakness after we've had Gandhiji show the strength of it? So I don't think that it is weakness. It may look like weakness, but we shouldn't go by that. We should see what it is capable of. Yeah. Dharmachari and dharmastha. Is it any dharmastha means established in dharma. Dharmachari, no difference. The one who has dharma is an achara. Yeah, it is all a blessing. Having you in my life is also a blessing, Iris. I consider it, all of you, my good karma. Would it be appropriate to say that the birth, sustenance and death of a jiva, there is creation, sustenance and dissolution of Jagat? No. that will not be appropriate to say. Yeah, that like in Poland also same thing happened, yeah. To apply Vedanta in everyday life, when we are kind with some people or ignore what they do to us, some take advantage, how can we behave not hurting them and ourselves at the same time? Because if I behave badly, I will incur bad karma. And if I behave nicely, they will take advantage. Very good question. Wonderful. Really, Vedanta in everyday life, you have really got it. It means to live a life of not hurting others and not getting hurt in the process. That is Vedanta, really. It's beautiful. That's the point of life. And you have gained that understanding, which is very nice. Now only thing that is remaining is to put it into practice, which is a small thing because half the battle is won. So what I would say, Nafise, is that you have some healthy boundaries. Yeah. Kind means you don't have to unwind completely and unravel in the process of being kind. You can be kind with boundaries. Have healthy boundaries. In fact, it helps people to know that these are my limits. Yes, I can make exceptions. Nothing is written in stone. But these are my limits. This is my private time. And also it helps to focus on the knowledge. If you focus on the knowledge, then your whole life is scripted. You don't have time to engage in, dysfunctional acts of kindness. You won't have time at all. And so therefore, basically what is happening is this, that you have to see this very, very clearly. So if you have a focus and a direction for your life and make that your boundary, and suppose knowledge you choose as the focus, then you don't have time for other things. And even if somebody asks, sorry, it's time for class, sorry, it's time for my studies, for my meditation, for my, yoga practice, whatever it is. So therefore, having healthy boundaries helps other people also. Because those that are accustomed to taking advantage, they also need to know where they should and should not go. So it is you're doing them a favor as well. Kamala says, I have 2 friends murdered over the past 6 months. That was terrible. I'm so sorry to hear that. The murderer took advantage of their free will. Yes. It was part of the karma of the 2 that had to undergo this heinous situation, and it's not their fault. Karma doesn't mean it's their fault, but it was part of their karmic profile because how we are born, how we die, how the body dies, how the body is born, what kind of parentage, this is all part of the karmic profile. So the karmic profile of the 2 people who were the victims of these heinous crimes had this as a possibility, and then the people who killed them, they have incurred really bad karma, very bad karma, which is not good at all. Yeah. So I'm sorry to hear that. Yeah. And karma is not an excuse, it's an explanation. We have to remember that. Okay? Yeah. I wouldn't say it is all karma. See, remember what we are talking about is the abuse of free will. Little bit of karma of the people will be there. Because why those people and why not other people? If we ask, then you have to go back to karma only. But it is abuse of free will. Those who convert, those who are perpetrating violence, this is not due to karma. It is abuse of their free will. When they are going against dharma, they have a choice not to do that. Yeah. So I won't say it is karma. Little bit of karma is there. Because why those people, why that time, why in that place? But the rest of it, most of it is abuse of free will. And and you cannot say the percentage, because when even Bhagavan Krishna is asked about karma, what does he say? Gahana karmano gatihi. Don't ask me about karma, it's very convoluted. Very difficult to predict. Yeah. But what is important and what is reversing the karma? Yeah, topic is difficult. Nothing you can read. You just have to have Shraddha. In Bhagavad Gita you read. That is enough. That's the best treatise on karma is Bhagavad Gita. Nothing else really. Karma is a difficult topic. But what is reversing all that ancestry of suffering, that whole ancestry is suffering, Jayendraji, is how you are leading your life. That is what reversing it. All that forcible conversion, all that violence that your ancestors have undergone, you are reversing it by leading your life freely and in keeping with your values, in keeping with your pursuits, in keeping with what is dharmic for you right now. That is very important, and that will absolve all of them. That will really absolve not only you, but it's like a balm on the departed ancestors. You are doing them a lot, you are helping them a lot, and that is wonderful. I'm very happy and very proud of you. Yes, Vedanta is like that. It is comforting. Whatever we can do to prevent the abuse of free will, we can, but sometimes it cannot be prevented. You tell the person, don't do this, and they will not listen what to do, you know. So there are other ways of absolution. Yeah. Oh, just send it to the same place where you registered, arsha@verizon.net. There. No, everything will go well. This has been a good thing for you, and it is helping a lot of people that you shared your story. It's very important. Yeah. See, now you're not the only one. Everyone is having tears in their eyes. That is Bhagavan. Yes. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah, Sarve Santu Niramayah, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet, Asato Ma Sadgamaya, Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya, Mrityor Ma Amritangamaya, Om Shanti Shanti Shantihi, Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha, Harihi Om.